Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Ohioana Book Festival. I'm David Weaver, Executive Director of the Ohioana Library, and I'm delighted to have you join us for this very special program, kicking off the final day of our 15th anniversary festival. First, I'd like to say a thank you to all of our festival sponsors and partners, all of whom you can find listed on the Ohioana website. And special thanks to our official bookseller, the Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all the books featured at the festival by going online to bookloft.com. And now I'm pleased to introduce the very special guest for this morning's Coffee and Conversation with Ross Gay and Kari Gunter-Seymour. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator. Kari Gunter-Seymour is a ninth generation Appalachian. She is the founder and the executive director of the Women of Appalachia Project. And 2020 was a very, very special year for Kari. Her collection, A Place So Deep Inside America It Can't Be Seen, was published. And that's the book that she is here for at the Ohioana Book Festival. More than that, she was named Ohio Poet of the Year. And most significantly, she was named by Governor Mike DeWine as Ohio Poet Laureate. Only the third poet to hold that post, and the first woman and the first Appalachian. So we're delighted to welcome Kari, who's going to introduce Ross Gay. Kari, the ball's in your court.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really thrilled to be here today with all of you. So I'd like to introduce our very special guest, Ross Gay. Ross Gay is the author of 4 books of poetry: Beholding, the 2020 winner of the PEN American Jean Stein Book Award, Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude in 2015, winner of the Kingsley Tufts Award, and a finalist for the National Book Award and the National Books Critics Circle Award, Bringing the Shovel Down 2011, and Against Which 2006. He has also published a New York Times best-selling essay collection, The Book of Delights, in 2019, and has co-authored several chapbooks. He is the editor with the chapbook presses Q Avenue and Ledge Mule Press, and is a founding editor along with Carissa Chin and Patrick Rosal of the online sports magazine, Some Call It Ballin', and a founding board member of the Bloomington Community Orchard, a nonprofit fruit-free for all food justice and joy project. He has received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Breadloafs Writers Conference, and the Guggenheim Foundation. Ross Gay was born in Youngstown, Ohio, and teaches at Indiana University and in Drew University's low residency program. Ross, it is my absolute purest delight to welcome you to the Ohioana Book Festival.
Thank you, Kari. It's good to be with you. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, if we were, together in person, in front of you would be a cup of my grandma's boiled coffee. That's what she called it, boiled coffee, fresh boiled coffee. And you'd have a slice of her secret recipe molasses coffee cake. Because as David said, I'm Appalachian, and my grandmother would be ashamed of me if I did not feed you since I had invited you in. So will you please consider yourself virtually fed?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I purposely didn't do a big long introduction for you, though Lord knows I could have taken the first 20 minutes to do so, because your accomplishments are amazing. And I know that you're very you're shy about that. I know you're very humble about that. So I'm not going to put you on the spot with asking you to talk more about that sort of thing. But what I thought I'd love to hear, maybe starting out, is more about the Bloomington Community Orchard. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, totally. So the community orchard is this, there's a physical space. There's an acre space that is from where I'm sitting. If you went out that window, past the redbud tree, you'd pass a pear tree, you'd pass some basketball courts, and you would get to this orchard, which is an acre that is situated. It's right across the street from the YMCA. It's right next to an old and established community garden, so a big community garden. So it's a physical place that there's about 100 some fruit trees and fruit bushes and all kinds of medicinal herbs and et cetera, et cetera. It was found, or it was, is that the word founded? It was imagined by someone named Amy Countryman, whose house you would pass on the way, right across the street. And Amy came up with this idea. She was writing a thesis project, an undergraduate thesis project about, food security and stuff like that. And she did a kind of survey of the urban canopy, which means the trees that are managed by the city. And she found out that, less than, I don't know, like 0.5% of the trees produced any kind of edible stuff. It was probably black walnuts, probably same as would be out there. Black walnuts, persimmon, stuff like that. So she just wanted to imagine what are some ways that we could sort of collaboratively address the lack of, the ways that trees, like to feed us. So she thought of a community orchard. She did this for her thesis project, and then her advisor recommended it to the urban forester. The urban forester thought it was a great idea and said, if you can show support, we'll let you use this acre of land where it is. And Amy had a call out meeting, and there were probably 100 some people there. And then I was just talking about this yesterday. We were like a ragtag bunch, and we were not, there's some, some groups are like, they're board ready. They know exactly what you need to do. This was not that. And as a consequence, it was some of the most beautiful, some of the most beautiful, moving interactions ever. Because we were struggling to figure out how to do this thing, just because we loved trees, and we loved the idea there being an orchard there for other people who we do not know. And you can imagine if that's the spirit of the project, and that was the spirit of the project, and so it was messy and it was grueling, and we were like, it was completely unsustainable. We would have these board meetings, like, I don't know, twice a week sometimes, and they'd take like 3 to 4 hours. It was great. It was heaven. Anyway, now there's an orchard. I'd like to say the main product of the orchard is not like the bounty of fruit. There's some fruit, but it's always diseasy and someone said, OMG, board meetings that often. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But part of the reason it was so much is because we were preparing the site for the planting, and we were doing everything sort of quickly. But yeah, it was beautifully too much. It was inefficient, and I believe this, not always, but often inefficiency makes us closer. Inefficiency makes us have to do things together. Anyway, the orchard, what it is now, it's this, it's this ongoing. We had our 10-year celebration, I think, in October, and my involvement is less. I'm still on the board, but I'm less involved. But I still head over there and like help out on a scything day or a whatever day. Or I just gave before things shut down, I had a little poetry class over there that I taught in the orchard. And the real product, I was going to say, the real product is the gathering itself. It's the gathering and the sharing that the orchard itself foments. It foments a kind of studying how to be a neighbor. Lets us think about how to be neighbors to each other, how to care for each other.
I love that. And I had an inkling that that's exactly what it was, as you had created this space for community. And even though we can be fed by the produce, we're fed maybe even more by the community that you built there. And I think you should be really proud of that, Ross, as well as everyone else. And, thank you for doing that work, especially in an urban environment where a lot of people don't get spaces like that or get the opportunity to join in a program like that. So that's pretty wonderful. And I thank you for sharing that. So I guess we're here today to talk about your book a little bit too, though, and I want to be sure to do that. This beautiful book, you can see I've got, oh my gosh, I've dog-eared it. And I don't usually dog-ear books, but this one, and I've got pencil markings, and it's just, I can't say enough, and I don't have to because so many other people have. but I thought maybe you could read a little from it for us and maybe tell us the page number, because I know many of us have this book and we would probably like to read along with you while you do.
Yeah, maybe I'll read from the beginning.
Okay.
The first 12 pages or something. There's a place I usually like to stop at the beginning.
Okay.
So the book's called Beholding. I probably, who's awake at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning? I may not need to tell you who Dr. J is, who's awake at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. But in the event that I do, a great basketball player from 70s and 80s, played first in the ABA for the Nets, and then he came to Philadelphia. So I grew up outside of Philadelphia, born in Youngstown, grew up by the time I was 5 or 6 outside of Philadelphia. Born in Youngstown, but also lived in Elyria and Stowe and Painesville. So we moved all along this little area following. My dad worked at Pizza Hut, so we were just going to Pizza Hut. Basically, we lived where Pizza Hut. So anyway, I'll just read a little bit of this, and I always start with there's something at the beginning. It's abound in gratitude. This poem does not exist without the work and ideas and words of many, many writers and thinkers, among them Amiri Baraka, Garnett Cottigan, Toy Derricotte, Adesele Skirmai, Saidiya Hartman, Allen Iverson, Fred Moten, Kevin Kwashi, Patrick Rosal, Christina Sharp, and Susan Sontag, by which I mean the work and thinking and care and words are indebted to them and are sometimes actually theirs. And there's an epigraph, and the epigraph says, to be held, to behold. And that's from Christina Sharp's book, Blackness, In the Wake, on Blackness and Being. Beholding. You might have noticed there's nowhere to go. The wind cutting little eddies at your collarbones and behind your ear. So just so you know, I'm talking about this move from the 1980 NBA Finals. It's a famous move. You can YouTube it if you do not know what I'm talking about. You might have noticed there's nowhere to go. The wind cutting little eddies at your collarbones and behind your ear. As Dr. J drives from the foul line extended to the baseline, defended valiantly by Mark Landsberger, who in this poem, despite the doofy urge to make him so, is not allegorical, but is rather simply a hard-working journeyman ball player with decent athleticism and size, and a floppy mop of dusty blonde hair got caught up in the gust, sliding his size 16s quick so that Doc, after catching the ball at the elbow and taking one hard dribble toward the baseline where the dunk would usually commence, could not access the paint or the lane or the key, which is what we call the area nearest the goal, which in this case is an iron hole drawn in space and therefore implies a window, though the key makes it also a door that Landsberger, it seemed, was trying to keep shut. And so Doc leapt. He left his feet, which means more or less jumping with the ball with nowhere to go, and which we're warned against by coaches from day one for the ensuing requisite stupid pass, or more simply, though no less stupid, travel, also called walking, which the leaping often leads to. Keep your feet, again and again, which makes the leaping, leaving your feet, sound sacrificial. The way in certain places, certain countries or countries inside of countries, you must leave by foot with nowhere to go, which there is. And Doc, you should note, after the one dribble, clasps the ball with only his right hand, without once at all in any shape or form using the left, which, among other things, friends, differentiates this from all the descendant moves. Kevin Durant, Dwayne Wade, Steph and Giannis and Harden and Kawhi. Yes, Bron too, I shall not be moved. And using only one hand, which is amazing, but not yet miraculous, more a physical and therefore genetic fact, thanks Ma and Pa Irving. Doc's hand becomes an octopus, gripping the ball, nothing like prey, and with that ball snugged in his mitt, Doc maybe, sorta, kinda thought something like, I am gonna put this schmuck, the schmuck in this case being Landsberger, though do not please revert to a simplistic allegorization of the journeyman, which word I repeat advisedly, on a poster. Though schmuck is a word I'd be surprised to hear Doc say. And the word posterize, common usage, posterize is asked, you might be thinking is a bit of an anachronism in this poem, in this move, which ostensibly occurred in the 1980 NBA Finals, though we all know that nothing happens only when it happens. We all know nothing happens only when it happens. Emerging more, there's like 2 more pages. Emerging more in the epic, which in the NBA lasts 3 to 5 years following Doc's retirement. Neek and Jordan, Hakeem the Dream, and Clyde the Glide, Barkley the Glove, and yo, remember Sean Kemp? Though Doc probably thought it anyway, visionary that he was. When will they verb what I keep doing to these schmucks, especially Bill fucking Walton? Driving from the foul line extended toward the baseline as the unsuspecting Landsberger, who did a fine job of shuffling his size 16s and not holding, keeping Irving from the key, and who must for a scant and fleeting moment have felt a degree of pride when Doc, after the hard dribble right, left his feet with nowhere to go. Billy Cunningham on the sideline, his hands on his hips, his sport coat thrown open, a few strands of hair stuck to his moist pink brow, and almost smiling as Doc began sailing out of bounds over the baseline. And Landsberger, a solid leaper, skied and foreclosed the possibility of Doc sneaking a shot in this side of the basket, by which I mean dunking probably quite hard, by putting his hand against the backboard, a big door swinging shut, at which fine and commendable defensive effort, Irving simply decided in the air to knock on other doors by soaring more. Have you ever decided anything in the air? I'll stop there. And maybe I'll show the picture too. I'll show the picture. That,
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And what a place to leave us by soaring more. Whoo. Could we talk about the title a little bit?
Yeah.
Because this is so loaded. This is so loaded. I had a preconceived idea when I bought this book, and then it just went nuts. You know, it just went crazy. So
Yeah. So the book was called Flight, and it was from the time I started it, which, I mean, it started several places, but from the time I sort of started this iteration of this thing, I was just calling it Flight. And, you know, and I have like all of these, you know, I would write it and then I would transcribe it into the computer, and I would have all of these, I have all these versions in the computer, Flight 1, Flight through, you know, a million versions. And then, you know, I remember I was actually in Italy. This is interesting. I was actually in Italy where I was, at the same time that I got the idea to write the Book of Delights, I was working on this poem, which is interesting. I forgot that was happening at the same time. Interesting to me. But anyway, the poem was at a place, and I kind of just, I couldn't find it. And I put it away, and I put it away for months. Like I was just going hard on it, and I put it away for months. And then I took it back out. I mean, it was weird. Like I realized when I was in Italy, I went in the wrong direction. I took it like far in a direction that actually wasn't, I think, useful. I wasn't listening to the poem. And I found an old draft. We were just cleaning the house, and in a bag of papers, I just found an old draft that was like several drafts earlier. And I thought, oh, this is where I took the wrong turn. This is right before I took the wrong turn. And I went back into it from there. But at that time, a handful of books had come into my life. One of them was Christina Sharp's book, In the Wake. And which is just one of the most, it's just an astonishing book. And it moved me so much. And it is one of the things that made me actually be able to finish this book, I think. And I wrote, after reading her book and after her conversation, the way she talks about, that book is also about it's about many things, but one of the things is about like, looking. After reading her book, the title changed. The title changed from Flight to Beholding. Though in my mind, Flight is also one of the titles, but it was reading Christina Sharp's work that made me know, oh, what I'm talking about is how do we be holding each other? It's actually that's kind of what felt like a miraculous combination. I can remember, actually, this is Ohioana. And I went to try to finish this poem. I was like, oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go get a little place in Cincinnati, where at the time I didn't know anyone. So I'm just gonna like fall into this poem. And I had my 3 or 4 days, and I came to the last night of being there, and I was like, well, I guess I'm not gonna find this poem. Maybe I'll never find this poem. And then I went to some coffee shop. It was open late. It was kind of coffee shop, and I remember there was a little like a writing group. It was so sweet, like a multi-generational writing group in some kind of coffee shoppy restaurant thing, where there's other shops. So someone probably knows what it is in town, and they were across the way, and it was sweet. They were talking. They were like, talking about each other's work. And I remember like it was important to me. It made an impact that it wasn't just, 20-year-olds, and it wasn't just 40-year-olds. It was like, and what was in my mind from the Christina Sharp book, it was in there. Other things too. I mean, I was reading this Saidiya Hartman book at the time, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments. I was engaged with other stuff, but that Christina Sharp especially, and then this phrase of Allen Iverson's, we're talking about practice. That those two things, the Christina Sharp and Beholding, and Allen Iverson's sort of what I think of as like this meditation on the idea of practice, came together and actually kind of helped me get to where the poem could kind of come to where it's come, So that's a little bit of a long story, but that's the kind of origin story, I think, part of the origin story anyway, of that title.
I really love that, because we all know the titles are so important, aren't they? I mean, we can write the best poem ever, and if the title is not helping lift it up, then it can be our downfall, right?
Yeah.
So, and the thing that astounded me about this title is, as I said, there's so much meaning. It can be so many things, because as we find out later in your book, you talk a lot about how we be holding our breath, and how we behold different things. And I just thought it was absolutely genius, as simple as it seems to say, beholding, and beholding, I mean, it's just astounding, and I love that we can all learn from that. Ross, I think your work does that for all of us. You allow us to enter it so beautifully. And I'm not going to keep talking, because I know people want to hear you read, even though I'd love to talk to you forever. So what I was thinking of is, you've talked a little bit about your process, because that was going to be one of my next questions, but you have kind of done that for us, and I appreciate that, because I mean, this long poetry, I envy that as well. Because I just simply, at this point, cannot do it. But it kind of sounds like there is this process where you write some of it and then you put it away and come back to it. It doesn't all come to you at once, is the way I was envisioning it. You sat down and just boom,
No.
Yeah. But I will let you be a god today, and you can say yes if you like. But I thought maybe, do you feel like reading a little bit from Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude? Or okay, yeah, we would love that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's see. I will read to you this. Maybe I'll read this fig tree poem. To the fig tree on 9th and Christian. Tumbling through the city in my mind without once looking up, the racket in the lugwork, probably rehearsing some stupid thing I said or did, some crime or other. The city, they say, is a lonely place until, yes, the sound of sweeping, and a woman, yes, with a broom, beneath which you are now too, the canopy of a fig. its arms pulling the September sun to it, and she has a hose too, and so works hard, rinsing and scrubbing the walk, lest some poor sod slip on the silk of a fig and break his hip and not probably reach over to gobble up the perpetrator. The light catches the veins in her hands. When I ask about the tree, they flutter in the air, and she says, "Take as much as you can, please help me." So I load my pockets and mouth, and she points to the stepladder against the wall to mean more, but I was without a sack, so my meager plunder would have to suffice. And an old woman whom gravity was pulling into the earth loosed one from a low slung branch, and its eye wept like hers, which she dabbed with a kerchief as she cleaved the fig with what remained of her teeth. And soon there were 8 or 9 people gathered beneath the tree, looking into it like a constellation, pointing, "Do you see it?" And I am tall and so good for these things. And a bald man even told me so when I grabbed 3 or 4 for him, reaching into the giddy throngs of yellow jackets, sugar stone, which he only pointed to, smiling and rubbing his stomach. I mean, he was really rubbing his stomach, like there was a baby in there. It was hot. His head shone while he offered recipes to the group, using words which I couldn't understand. And besides, I was a little tipsy on the dance of the velvety heart rolling in my mouth, pulling me down and down into the oldest countries of my body, where I ate my first fig from the hand of a man who escaped his country by swimming through the night, and maybe never said more than 5 words to me at once, but gave me figs. And a man on his way to work hops twice to reach at last his fig, which he smiles at and calls baby. "Come here, baby," he says, and blows a kiss to the tree, which everyone knows cannot grow this far north, being Mediterranean and favoring the rocky, sun-baked soils of Jordan and Sicily. But no one told the fig tree or the immigrants. There is a way the fig tree grows in groves. It wants, it seems, to hold us. Yes, I'm anthropomorphizing, goddammit. I have twice in the last 30 seconds rubbed my sweaty forearm into someone else's sweaty shoulder, gleeful, eating out of each other's hands on Christian Street in Philadelphia, a city like most, which has murdered its own people. This is true. We are feeding each other from a tree at the corner of Christian and Ninth. Strangers, maybe never again.
That is just so beautiful. And it's always so ironic to me, the way things work, because you did this wonderful work with the Bloomington community, and then this poem was, I say, given to you. I know you work hard for them, but about another community and other fruit, and how that fruit brought people together. And fruit is a word that's considered, growth, and we bear fruit. Yeah. And you educate us so beautifully. You preach to us, but it doesn't feel like preaching in your work. It's just so beautiful, Russ. And I know I speak for thousands who say, thank you for that, because we need to hear these words. And you give them to us so perfectly and beautifully. And I'm probably going to embarrass you with my next question. If I do, you can say I'd rather not. But I wondered if you could just, what does it feel like? We can live vicariously to receive the Penn Award and to receive the Kingsley Tuft Award. What does that feel like?
It feels lucky. It feels really lucky, and it feels like there's all these ways to think about it. I mean, like the material, there's like one thing, it's a material reality, which is like, that's pays bills. And that's a thing, a big thing. The other thing is that it, it feels like a, some, I don't even know how to say it exactly. Like when someone is reading your work who you really admire and says, "Well done," that feels moving. That feels moving. like there's the material reality of the prize. Then there's a kind of affirmation, which is nice. But there is, when there are people whose work, you know, you admire, say, you know, I think something like, I think you're doing something. That feels good. That feels really good. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that, because I know you are so humble, and I know that was hard for you to rally to that question, but I do thank you for doing that, because we do get to live vicariously through you, through our admiration of your work, and then to see you be valued for that kind of brings value to all of us who are doing writing, is one way to look at it as well, because as I said, you do so much to lift us all up with your work, to teach us all. And I so much personally appreciate that, as I know does everyone else. And I, of course, want you to read some more of your work. I was thinking about some individual poems that I love, and I don't want to be the person who dictates what you read, but I did want to make an admission, is that the first poem I ever came upon of yours was A Small Needful Fact. And it brought me to my knees, and I wept. And not long after that, I did a workshop with Laureate Van Cleef. And yeah, Laureate, or know of her, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it was just a wonderfully enlightening workshop, and your work came, to the surface of that workshop, and that's when I feel like I, got to know you, as we say. And we looked at Burial. We looked at so many of your beautiful, beautiful poems. So I was just thinking if you might be willing to share even a few of those oldies, or whatever you want. But
actually, you just said an oldie. I'm going to read an oldie.
Yes, I'd love that.
Read a proper oldie. It's nice. I have a beloved friend and teacher who, if I were to say I'm going to read an oldie, he's Gerald Stern. He's like 96. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you don't even know what an oldie is. This is called Two Bikers Embrace on Broad Street. And this is the first poem in my first book. It's not the first one that I wrote in this book, but it's the first poem in the book. Maybe, since you're something like me, you too would have nearly driven into oncoming traffic for gawking at the clutch between the two men on Broad Street in front of the hospital, which would not stop. Each man's face so deeply buried in the other's neck. These men not my guests to be fucked with. Squeezing through that first porous layer of the body into the heat beneath. Maybe you too would have nearly driven over 3 pedestrians as your head swiveled to lock on their lock. Their burly fingers squeezing the air from the angels on the backs of their denim jackets, which reminds you the 1,000,001 secrets exchanged in nearly the last clasp between your father and his brother, during which the hospital's chatter and rattle somehow fell silent in deference to the untranslatable song between them. And just as that clasp endured through what felt like the gradual lengthening of shadows and the emergence of once cocooned things, and continues to this day, so too did I float unaware of the 3,000-pound machine in my hands, drifting through a stoplight while I gawked at their ceaseless cleave, going deeper and deeper still, so that Broad Street from Fairmount to the Parkway reeked of the honey-scented wind pushed from the hummingbirds now hovering above these two men, sweetening somehow the air until nectar, yes, nectar, gathered at the corners of my mouth like sun-colored spittle, the steel vehicle now a lost memory as I joined the fire-breasted birds in listening to air exchanged between these two men who are themselves listening forever to the muscled contours of the other's neck, all of us still and listening as if we had nothing to blow up, as if we had nothing to kill.
You always do that to us right at the end. That is just so wonderful. Just so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that very early piece.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
My goodness. I think we actually have time for at least one more poem before maybe our audience can ask a few questions.
Yeah.
Is there something you'd like to share? Because
yeah,
I can name 1,000.
Maybe I'll do this this How to Fall in Love with Your Father poem.
Oh,
Yes. Put your hands beneath his armpits, bend your knees, wait for the clasp of his thinning arms, the best lock, cheek to cheek. Move slow. Do not, right now, recall the shapes he traced yesterday on your back, moments before being wheeled to surgery. Do not pretend the anxious calligraphy of touch was signed beyond some unspeakable animal stammer. Do not go back further into the landscape of silence you both tended with body and breath until it nearly obscured all but the genetic gravity between you. And do not imagine wind now blowing that landscape into a river which spills into a sea, because it doesn't. That's not this love poem. In this love poem, the son trains himself on the task at hand, which is simple, which is finally the only task he has ever had, which is lifting the father to his feet. It's kind of neat to read some of these old poems because it's like, man, subjects kind of stay the same. Subjects kind of stay the same, you know? Yeah. And maybe, I'm just gonna read this very short one too, just because it's like, this is the last poem in the book. It's called Thank You. You know, my third book is called Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. Thank you. If you find yourself half naked and barefoot in the frosty grass, hearing again the earth's great sonorous moan that says, you are the heir of the now and gone, that says all you love will turn to dust and will meet you there, do not raise your fist. Do not raise your small voice against it, and do not take cover. Instead, curl your toes into the grass, watch the cloud ascending from your lips, walk through the garden's dormant splendor, say only thank you, thank you.
Sometimes I can't catch my breath after I read a poem of yours, and hearing you read them is even more, the experience is more profound. Thank you, Ross, so much. We do have a couple questions. However, it turns out that you already answered them. So, but Cheryl Tomsky wanted to say, she asked about the poetry that is basketball. And she wrote this very early on in the program. She says, full confession, Youngstown native here, whose son is a former college power forward, a forever lover of poetry, and on the faculty at Temple U, Ross's alma mater.
Wait, the son is, or the
son is.
Oh,
the son of Cheryl Tomsky, her son. Yes.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And
That's
so,
why she's a PhD at Temple.
And she wants you to know her son wears a size 16.
That's amazing.
So there you go. Yeah.
Wow.
That's just so awesome. And I'm looking through the chat. I'm not seeing any other questions there. And if there are not questions, then yes, you can just keep reading. And I think we would all absolutely love that. And I'm just going to be quiet now and let you read until we're at that. I'll just kind of let you know when we're at the end of our program, but we really have about 45 minutes unless somebody does pop up with a question between now and then. So, oh, wait, just as I said that, there's a third. Oh, here we go. Sherry Henrik would like to know, when did you know you had a poet's soul?
I don't know who doesn't have a poet's soul. I guess maybe I'll say that. Or whatever that thing is. But maybe I could think about, there's also that basketball question. There was a little question tucked in there, and I'm going to try to address that too. But like, what does it mean to have a poet's soul? I can say like a lot of things that I like, I wasn't like into reading that much as a kid, and the stuff that I was into reading, like I realized, because I often tell the story that I didn't read very much because I was into playing sports, I was into skateboarding, I didn't care, and I wasn't interested in school. And so that kind of thing of like kids, finding refuge in books or whatever, that wasn't my thing at all. But I was into these other things, I was into music, and I was deeply into sports, and I was deeply into skateboarding. I was deeply into sort of different modes of performance. I was acutely aware of I was a dancer, and I knew how to dance, and I thought hard about it, and I practiced it, and I rehearsed it, and I rehearsed it when I wasn't rehearsing. I was just playing around. Same with like skateboarding and all that stuff. So that's one thing that I am sort of, the older I get, the more, and the older I get, and probably the less enthused, you might say, or the more bored I get with what education sometimes gets called, what they call education, the more I'm like, oh yeah, a lot of like the stuff you all were trying to do to get out of being in school was like school. That was like where you were actually studying. Yeah, I mean, I got in college, I went to college, and I played football in college, and I was close to failing out. And I had a teacher put me onto a poet named Amiri Baraka, and boom, and I started reading. And there were other things that were happening at that time. Among them, that I think I was like, really depressed. Other things, I had friends who were also like, I made friends who are arty, who are kind of into arts and stuff. And I just started to imagine and learning that this making art as a thing, which I was into, like, I was like an art major in high school. We had majors, art major and a gym major. So that I took phys ed every day, and I took art every day. Everything else I was trying to run from. But so I had, like it wasn't, it wasn't like, my dad read all the time. He was constantly, his face was in a book. So it was there, the idea of like the book and all that. But I don't know. I just wasn't, I wanted to skateboard more. So anyway, when I was 19 or whatever, and got turned on to this poet, and all these other things were happening, I started reading, and then I started like wondering how I could do the same thing that the poem An Agony As Now did to me, and other poems by Sylvia Plath and other people that I was just deeply, deeply studying. So yeah, so that's, maybe it's kind of like that I got put into a groove with folks who were also kind of into the same stuff, and who were like, oh, this, like the ways that you're trying to do stuff it's interesting. Those are interesting things that you're thinking about. Yeah, maybe I'll answer that like that. Like, having been supported, having been put into place in a certain kind of way. Those things, learning how to learning how to maybe like use your, put your sensitivity to use, or something like that. I don't know, how do you, yeah. The other one though, basketball. There was a question about basketball that I do actually want to address a little bit, the poetry that is basketball. And what I wanted to say is that I'm writing more about basketball right now, writing a kind of book of epistolary essays about with someone I play basketball with. And the thing that I'm realizing more than ever is that basketball, and when I talk about basketball, like I mean real basketball. When I say real basketball, I mean basketball without refs and without coaches. That real, or if the coach is there, the coaches are kind of, they're kind of, maybe they bought the shirt, but they're not really telling you what to do. That, basically, I mean pickup basketball, which is one of the many places, but one of the most important places to me where I've learned how to study, or I've had the occasion to study and the opportunity to study what it means to be with people you do not know, you possibly do not know, negotiating minute by minute and second by second what it means for us to be together in space. In other words, the premise of the game, the first premise of the game is that we have to determine what's a foul, what's a travel, what's permissible, in terms of pushing, what's this and what's that. There are common rules. If the ball goes through the basket, it's probably a basket. There's the boundary line. If you step out of bounds, it's probably out of bounds. But beyond that, you really are every time, every different influx of participants in the community is going to have to refigure the terms of negotiation and the terms of our being together, which is a study in being together. Basketball, to some extent, basketball feels like a place to study that. In a certain kind of way, there's something to me that, and I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but it does in some way help me think about what it means even to be a writer, to be a poet. There's something about negotiating with something that I do not yet know how to negotiate with, or what I might be negotiating with. So even, Kari, when you said that the poem was kind of given to me on the fig tree poem, absolutely. I put it in the lines and this and that, but it is very much the case that this thing was given. And in a certain way, I don't want to say it too much, but that it's possible that was, actually in terms of negotiation. I think a dog is stuck on a bed, Tucker. It's gonna take 2 seconds.
Yeah, sure. I love that part, that the dog got stuck and he's going to go rescue the dog. And doesn't that just speak to who we all think that maybe Ross Gay is from his work? And here he is back.
Okay,
that was a quick rescue. I love that. I was just saying, that's just so you to say, I don't care what's going on. My dog's in trouble. I'm going to go get him.
Dog needs something.
I love that. And I don't have to tell you how Appalachians feel about their dogs. So, hey, we'll just let that be, right? We do have another question. I think we might have time for just a quick answer here, because I know we have to do the credits and everything at the end. But Stephanie Kendrick asks, your laugh is so infectious. Often, to get out of writing blocks, I have to step outside of the poetry world in some way. What helps you with writing slumps? Do you have a particular activities, places you escape to, etc.?
My slumps, I used to tell people I never got, I don't mean slumps. I mostly write bad stuff. So that could be considered a slump. But, and I'm also, I'm interested in not quite knowing what I'm doing. I think that helps me feel like I'm not in a slump, because I'm a lot of times when it's not going anywhere, I've come to relate to that as oh, you're finding something, you just don't know how to catch it yet, which feels to me just that's part of my most exciting moment of what is this? What is coming, or what don't I know how to listen to? That's the metaphor I use lately. I just don't yet know how to listen to this thing. But I started to realize that I can't write on assignment. I can't do that. And so, I often talk to kids like students, college people or younger sometimes. And I'm and I've been recently saying, I've been lying all this time and just say I don't really get writing slumps. Like I have all these methods, and some of these methods are useful. I write letters to people. That's actually part of my writing process. I have a buddy who lives here in town. We're actually going to go take a walk in a minute. We write letters to each other. We live, we see each other all the time, but we write letters to each other. And I have other people I write letters to, but that's part of my writing. It's actually part of my writing process. Another thing, though, is that I think for me anyway, and I could imagine it being useful for other people, is collaboration as a way to sort of get outside of one's idea of like how a thing's supposed to be. Because I think maybe often those slumps come because we have an idea of how a thing needs to be. We have you might call it perfectionism. You might definitely call it a kind of predetermined notion of what a thing ought to be. And if you get hung up on that, it's really nice to collaborate with someone who's going to immediately destroy any semblance of that. Like you just got to let that go. So yeah, I say, at very least, collaboration, try to collaborate. And that's fun too, and that's really fun, collaborating.
I agree. I have a little group that I meet with as well, and they've really become my best friends.
Yeah.
Through the power of poetry, just getting together. So
yeah,
we kind of knew each other and we've become best friends through the group. So that's I'm glad you brought that up, Ross. We're so close on time, but just one quick question, because this is the last one. I loved hearing about the Bloomington project, and I'm wondering if there are other ways you have been able to use poetry as a vessel or catalyst to service work. And I know you're going to say yes, because your work itself does, but
yeah, poetry as service work, you said?
That's what she's asking, if you have any other service work that similar to the Bloomington project.
Well, we have these different gardening projects that we kind of go in and out of that may or may not have anything to do with poetry.
But it's about community as well, though, right? You're talking community.
These community projects. Yeah, we're always kind of working on some stuff. We're always working on stuff. We're always trying to be doing stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And real quick, I'll just ask you, was there anything that you had wanted to say that I didn't think to ask, or nobody asked a question about? Have we missed anything today?
No, not at all. I'm glad to get to talk about like the writing slump and to talk about basketball. You can probably tell I could go on. I could go on about that.
Well, we would love to have you back anytime you'll come and have us. We would just love that. And we'll talk more about that anytime you want. But meantime, I think I have to turn things back over to David, but I do want to say thank you, Ross Gay, for being with us today. And I want to thank David Weaver. I want to thank Courtney Brown and Catherine Powers and all the good folks over at Ohioana Library for this absolutely amazing 4 days. And this year is the biggest year they've ever had for poetry. And I'm, of course, very excited about that. And so we've had lots of sharing of poetry, and the very last event today is, I think it's 5 marvelous poets who will end our day. And I'm sure David might say a little something about that. But anyway, Ross Gay, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Blessings to you and your people, and take very good care, because we need you.
Thank you. It's good to meet you.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Kari. This has been a wonderful hour, as I knew that it would be. And yes, we are excited because, a 4-day festival, we've had more poetry and more poetry programming than in any other festival. So, and we're just delighted that Ross and Kari, you could be together for this special conversation. And you're absolutely right. I mean, what better way to end National Poetry Month and the Ohioana Book Festival than with Lift Every Voice, 4 Black female poets will be talking about their work and their lives tonight at 5 o'clock, moderated by our good friend Scott Woods and the Streetlight Guild. So we're very delighted. So if you've just not gotten enough of poetry, and who can, you've got one more opportunity tonight at 5. Again, Ross, congratulations on the Gene Stein Book Award. Kari, yes, indeed, be holding a poem, and she's holding it. And you can get copies of their books and all of the festival books featured by our authors at bookloft.com. So thank you all again. Check out the schedule. A lot more coming up yet today. Go to our website to find out. So thank you all for joining us, for getting up and sharing your coffee and your conversation with Ross and with Kari. And we will see you all again. Thank you very much. Thank you.